You're listening to Mimir, the podcast for aspiring entrepreneurs, with me, your host, Maddie Kelly. Each week, I dive deep in my interviews with successful founders to leave you with the tools necessary to build your dream lives. So get ready for some kick-ass advice. Hey guys, welcome back to Mimir, and boy, do I have an episode for you today. I have the absolute pleasure of sitting down with Eric Malka, the co-founder of The Art of Shaving. This is such an exciting interview for me personally as the host and founder of Mimir, and I cannot wait to dive in. When Eric co-founded The Art of Shaving, he wasn't just launching a brand, he was reshaping an entire industry. With a relentless drive and a deep belief in natural skincare, he built one of the most recognizable luxury grooming brands, ultimately selling it to Procter Gamble. But after achieving his dream and reaching what a lot of us would consider to be the pinnacle of success, Eric made a very surprising decision. He walked away. Despite building a billion-dollar company, he found himself anxious, unfulfilled, and questioning everything. He realized that success alone didn't guarantee happiness, and that real fulfillment required something deeper. Before the interview, I had the chance to read his new book, On the Razor's Edge, The Story of the Art of Shaving. Eric shares how he transformed from a young entrepreneur with something to prove into a seasoned investor, helping the next generation of founders. In typical Mimir fashion, this is very unlike every other big brand name interview. So many of Eric's responses surprised me, and some of my favorite moments include how a chip on his shoulder fueled his success and why self-doubt can actually be a powerful motivator, why visionary founders struggle with execution and how to find the right balance, the truth behind entrepreneurial luck and how to increase your odds of finding it, how to overcome overthinking, what most investors get wrong about backing early stage entrepreneurs, and how he helps founders today, not as a consultant, but as a partner. Eric doesn't just talk about success, he talks about what comes after, the anxieties, the realizations, and the hard choices that most entrepreneurs don't even see coming. This is a must listen for anyone building a business, navigating ambition, or questioning what success really means. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Eric to the podcast. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this and taking the time out of your day. I honestly really appreciate it. It's actually like an honor for me. So thank you so much.
It is my absolute pleasure.
One of the first moments in the book that I was reading that really caught my attention was how you talked about this chip on your shoulder and how it is what drove you. And what I really liked about this approach that I felt was really different from what I think a lot of people talk about today, which is sort of overcoming your insecurities as opposed to leaning into them. And I would love to get your thoughts about how you felt like this approach worked for you and, you know, why it's a little bit different than what everybody else is doing.
Sure, I'd love to. When I started writing this book and through the process, my premise was to reverse engineer why I was able to beat such difficult odds.
Yeah.
I'm not a special person. I was a young guy, ordinary guy with really everything stacked against me. So why the hell did I succeed the way I did? That's really the premise of the book. And what I came to realize is that some of my experiences as a teenagers, and, let's face it, my traumas were very mild. I'm not suggesting that my life was horrendous. I never endured incredible traumas, but relative to my life, I had, difficult teenage years that really, I think survival instincts is what really kicked in for me. And it's a reptilian brain that goes into survival mode. And in that time, as I looked back on my psyche as a teenager with what felt like everyone was against me, everybody looked down on me because I quit college, because I was smoking weed, because my parents were broke, because for many reasons, I started to develop this obsession about succeeding in life. And as I look back on it, I feel like it was really my way of proving the world wrong about me. And
Hmm.
as I thought about this concept, I realized that, you know, I'm a branding guy, so I think about the purpose of my brand. How do we motivate ourselves beyond financial rewards when you're
Yeah.
creating a beautiful brand? And then what are your goals financially to support that cause? But those things are very, very inspirational. But to me, it felt like my obsession was beyond that. I wasn't trying to save the world. I was strictly trying to prove the world wrong about me. And that's why I talk about the chip on my shoulder, which was a huge motivator. And I say that had my adolescent years been a little bit easier, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. That's the
I
bottom line.
I mean, I like this approach. I feel like it's really fresh and frank. And I think if we all take a step back and look at ourselves as entrepreneurs, I think we all to some degree have this. Like,
Yes,
relatively speaking, I have a great childhood. My parents took great care of us. We had a beautiful home. We never had to worry about anything. But I too still have that desire to prove myself that I am and have the capabilities of being just as successful as they are and like living up to their expectations. And
for sure.
I think that if we're all being honest with ourselves, something like that drives us. And I like to open the conversation to say that it's fine to talk about that and to be honest about that. And like,
Nothing
yes,
wrong with it.
right. And we all have a mission and purpose in life, and absolutely that should drive you. But at the same time, I don't think it's a bad thing to say that, like, also I have an insecurity that I'm trying to fill.
No, not at all. And if you look at any successful athletes, actors, artists, who wants it the most is
Yeah.
the one who wins. Not the most talented, is who wants it the most. And you can have a chip on your shoulder because you had a great family that was extremely successful and makes you feel like you're not living up to it,
Hmm.
or you were given everything the easy way. So it doesn't matter how you get there. As I talk to entrepreneurs all the time, I now look for those cues between the lines of their story to see where that chip came from. And when you read about, guys like Steven Spielberg or Richard Branson or Tom Brady or Elon Musk, they all say they had a chip on their shoulder for one reason or another. So could that be a motivator? What I would call fire in your belly. That could be. It was for me, at least, I think.
Well, this kind of brings me to my next question is a theme that I noticed throughout the entire book as well was that you had this really overwhelming belief in yourself. And I know this to be a common trait amongst entrepreneurs. You kind of have to have this like delusion that you can make it regardless of the circumstances. And do you
Yeah.
think that that too was also born out of necessity, or do you think it's something that you cultivated additionally through experience?
I think it's a combination of things. I think
Mhm.
it's definitely out of necessity because when you don't have a plan B,
Yeah.
when you're in the middle of the ocean and you don't have a raft and you have to swim for your life, you're going to swim a lot more than you ever were capable of. I think that's the necessity that causes that. But there's more than that because I think some people are wired in a delusional way. They're called visionaries.
Mm.
What are visionaries? We feel awkward to say I'm a visionary because it feels like you're full of yourself to say
Yes.
that. But being a visionary is not always a blessing. It comes with other issues. You know, I I I think I'm a visionary because I have the ability to see a future that doesn't exist in my head and understand how I'm going to get there and believe that it's actually possible against all odds. That's borderline delusional. But if you
Yes.
believe you're delusional, you will never get close to it.
Mhm.
So at the same time, it could be a huge pitfall to be a visionary. You need people, in my case, I had my wife who was extremely grounded. She's almost a pessimist. She's a realist. And somewhere in the middle is what we've always found the success to be. Whereas I would have gone way off the rails, but and in her case, she would have been at home, never talking to anyone. So between the two of us, we created an equilibrium between those two extremes. That's what complementary skills are all about. So being a visionary, is glorified in society, but is just uh, part of it's one of the cogs of the wheel, an important cog of the wheel. But in my case, I was built to be that role in our company, to be that leader, because a leader automatically must have a vision, and he has to make everybody believe in that vision. And I
Yeah.
think we talk about manifestation. I mean,
Mhm.
it's right there. Manifestation, vision,
Mm.
believing the impossible, believing you can cure your own cancer. We've heard people say,
Yeah.
if you don't really believe in the crazy stuff you're trying to heal yourself, it won't work, because we know nothing about the brain at this point. We don't know how powerful the brain is, and believing 100% that you're going to make it for whatever reason is going to increase your chances of doing so. And then you put a chip on your shoulder with fire in your belly, like you have no
Yeah.
choice. It's a life or death situation. And then you add to that a little bit of talent and, and a couple of people that complement each other in their skill sets. That's a good recipe.
Yeah, and I'm curious as well. I know that some entrepreneurs, visionaries, CEOs struggle with the execution portion. Like there's always one person who's sort of like the idea man, and sometimes they're not always the type to be detail oriented and to be the actual like executioner of that role. But do you feel like
Well, yes and no. I separate detail orientation from execution. I
mm,
consider myself a visionary that gets shit done,
hmm,
but I'm not detail oriented. My
interesting?
wife is a detail oriented person. When I want it to be good enough, I want it to, I'm looking at the big picture, the vision, and my wife is looking at the specs on the picture and saying, there's something wrong there. We need to fix that little thing. And those two again together is really what's been the magic for us.
Yeah.
Because if you're just big picture guy, you're not going to create anything meaningful. And if you're a detailed person, you're going to spend the next 40 years trying to make it perfect. So the two of them again together is really the theme here of our partnership. And by the way, as I studied my story, I looked at other successful people, and we don't realize, but most successful people were in partnerships.
Hmm.
When you look at, you know, a lot of these success stories are based on partnerships where we don't really look at one because they're more of the introverts,
Yeah.
usually the brainiacs, the ones that write the music, don't want to be in the limelight. And the lead singer who has the persona is getting all the fame, but some of the talent, most of the talent may be in the one that's in the shadows, if you will.
Well, it's really fun because I think so much of this is about the sort of mysteries that the universe presents us, which is we don't always understand how things are going to play out, but it always plays out in the way that it's meant to and in sort of these fortuitous ways. And, the way in which you met your wife and how she became the perfect person to develop the product and your guys' balance with that. And something that I found really fascinating in the book, you talk about how much of entrepreneurialism is about luck, but you mentioned some really interesting tips about how to increase your odds of finding luck.
Absolutely. That's a subject that's not very well understood, obviously. Luck,
Yeah.
it's hard to figure it out, but um,
She's a wily minx, that luck.
that's right. But we do know that luck is somewhat created. You're not going to find luck sitting on the couch watching television.
Right.
You need to be a go-getter. You need to have an optimistic mind. You need to lean in. As I get older, I realize that every time I convince myself to show up, something great happens. So that in itself is how a luck is created, because even last night, I had to go to an event. I wasn't really that in the mood to go, but I knew that it was the kind of event I should go to, that I would enjoy myself. So I pushed myself to go, and it
Mm-hmm.
was incredibly opportunistic. I, I've met incredible people, and I think it's going to bring opportunities and luck. So leaning in is really a big part of it. That's, and then there's some of it that is unexplainable. If I would have started my company 10 years earlier, 10 years later, in a different city, we wouldn't be talking about it.
Yep.
I had to be at that moment in time. I think Malcolm Gladwell talks about it in his book Outliers, that if Steve Jobs wasn't born in that part of the country at that particular time, and he hadn't picked up the phone and called the Hewlett Packard CEO, all this would not be uh, happening. So yes, he made it happen, but there was some element of luck, and you can say it was divine intervention. You can say it was whatever your beliefs are. I like to believe that I was in the right place at the right time, and I seized that opportunity. And by seizing one opportunity, it led to other opportunities, and seizing those led to more opportunities, and, hard work and talent and persistence. And when I got knocked down, I got up.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are what contributes to success.
Yeah. It's a combination of this self-belief, the understanding of what drives you, a hint of luck, and something else that you mentioned that resonated a lot with me was the overcoming overthinking. This is something that I struggle with on a daily basis. I'm always overanalyzing, always overthinking. And the way that you phrased it about just focusing on the next immediate decision really helped to ground and put it into perspective.
Sure.
I'd love for you to double click into that a little bit, because I think a lot of people
course.
struggle with that.
I think a couple, there's different elements. Overthinking is usually a bad habit that stems from not trusting yourself.
Yeah.
And, lacking experience, frankly. Because I think as we get older and as we experience not overthinking, we become, I've practiced listening to my body, actually, and learning to use my body as my complete guide. As soon as I feel anxiety, I know that something is way off with what I'm doing. Like, oh, I'm stressed about this. This is not good. I should feel like tingly when I'm doing something. So if there's a pit in my stomach, I'm not doing this. I'm pivoting. So, things like being more intuitive, and your intuition is so powerful. We don't tap into it nearly enough. The power of our brain, our unconscious mind, of our what we call our gut, is extremely powerful. And I think people get paralyzed by fear, by insecurities, by lack of experience. Sometimes it's as simple as you just don't have enough data to make that decision. Go find the data so you can, the decision should make itself, right? Mm-hmm. If I tell you, I can put a knife through your leg or slap you in the face, which one do you prefer? You have overwhelming data. You're not going to overthink it. You're not going to be like, well, let me see, maybe a stabbing in the leg will do me some good. No, sometimes as an entrepreneur, you're trying to make a decision without data. You're trying to drive a car with blindfolds on. Imagine driving your car with blindfolds. That's an analogy I use with my entrepreneurs, because sometimes I'm like, I don't even know how you're running a business. You don't even know what's going on.
Yeah.
You have like blindfolds and you're driving a car at like 50 miles an hour. You know how stressful that would be if you did that in real life?
Yeah. I mean, I can feel it right now just even thinking about it.
Exactly. So sometimes it's as simple as trying to guess what the right decision is instead of seeking the information you need to make that decision. What do I need to know to make the right decision? It's all methodology based. And then, there's different personalities, but it's training. It's really training and training and training. Um, that's where I've landed with that. But one thing about luck, if I can
Yeah.
backtrack a little bit, in my book, I talk about grit and prudence. And I
Yes.
believe those two elements creates luck.
Yeah. Can you define them again? Because the way that you did it
Yes.
was very clear.
Well, grit is defined in the simplest of manners. It's running a marathon. Grit is about going long with focused determination and being in it for the long haul, for the 23 or 26.3 miles. A lot of entrepreneurs, unfortunately, they're running a sprint. They get to the marathon starting line and they think they're running a sprint for a mile.
Mm.
And that's the recipe for disaster for most entrepreneurs. You need to pace yourself in a marathon. You need to train for it and you're going to hit some walls that you have to get through. You're going to hit some obstacles and you're going to want to give up. And it's when you get past those that you get your second, third wins. In the case of prudence, which is another subject that is absolutely not discussed
Yeah.
enough with entrepreneurs because frankly, it's not sexy.
Mm.
Just that word feels like you're scared. And really, it's not about being risk averse because risk aversion is a non-starter in life.
Mm-hmm.
Just being born is risky, right? It's like you're full-time risk. So prudence is really about wisdom. It's about cultivating good decision-making skills. It's about learning from your mistake. It's about avoiding mistake by being thoughtful about your actions. So those are skills that you have to develop. Some situations in life and some wiring may help you to get there faster than others, but I believe grit and prudence were two of my weapons that allowed me to create luck in my path.
Yeah. You talked about it as almost like in chess, you don't think about or you don't plan for the end result. You just take step after step that
Yeah.
gets
You
you toward
don't
the winning goal.
That's right. Yeah, I use that analogy about chess. You don't win by one or two great moves. You
Yes.
make a lot of small great moves to position yourself for the win. And I think business is a little bit like that. People think they have to hit that super home run to make it, but it's really a lot of good decisions, small, tiny decisions you make for a long time that positions you for opportunities that you can really absorb. And I see it. I have friends that are extremely successful. And when you look at their success, they've been working at it for 20 years to get to that opportunity, to seize that opportunity.
Yeah. The overnight success is rarely overnight.
It happens. I mean, some people win the lottery, some people,
Sure.
it happens, but it's not a model. It's an
Right.
anomaly. It's a freak accident, if you will.
Yeah.
So,
One of
and when you
those.
look, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just. You go. You go. I want to make sure you finish your thought.
No, I just wanted to say the odds. When you look at the statistics of success, if you want to build $1 billion company, I mean, those odds are extremely low. It's a little bit more possible than winning the big lottery from an odds perspective. Lottery is the only thing harder to get than building $1 billion company.
Wow.
So when you look at it's 0.0006%, I mean, it's just incredibly difficult So depending on your aspirations, your odds are going to be, low probability shots, in tennis, low probability shots, and high probability shots. Just get the ball over the net. That's your best bet of winning that point, right?
Yeah. It's a simultaneously comforting yet terrifying statistic.
You can't win in life without statistics. You can't manage anything in life without knowing your statistics. You have to know what you're up against. I believe in that. So for me, it's comforting to know that, because success, there's a price attached to success, right? There are risks and there's a price to it. The price is really the important part. That's why with entrepreneurs, I often ask them, my first question is, what do you want? What do you want? And they're like, oh my God, this is such a hard question to answer. Such a simple question, but so difficult to answer. What do I want? Some people have never even thought about, what do I want? And then they tell you what they want. Then you say, well, if you want that, here's what's likely to happen. Here's the price you're going to have to pay. Forget about seeing your kids grow up, or, relationships are going to be tough to maintain. And, you're going to be very anxious, and you're going to be working super hard, and you're going to, and your chances of success are not going to be guaranteed. And then they're like, well, maybe I can reduce my, what I want. So again, it's the analogy of driving a car, right? If you drive 30 miles an hour, your insurance company thinks that there's a very low chance of you having an accident. But if you drive 150 miles an hour, your probabilities of a crash increase dramatically. And I think the same applies to your aspirations in life. Whether you want to have a nice, simple life or build $1 billion business, they're very different goals with different prices to pay to get there. And I don't want to discourage anyone. If that's what you want, you should go after what you want.
Yeah.
Just know what you're getting into.
Well, something that's interesting about your story too is you knew exactly what you wanted, and then you did it. And then after the fact, you kind of had this realization where you were like, I am still unhappy, and I'm still anxious, and I still have fear. And this is something that I'm just honestly, like, from a purely human perspective, curious about. Do we think that this void that I think all of us have in us, that we're all trying to fill in some way, shape, or form, be it with business or with alcohol or with people, like, who knows, is this something that we can ever really fill, or is this something that we just have to live with as human beings and it's just accepted as part of our experience?
I think life is an individual sport, right? So you come in alone, you leave alone. So I think it's really, I think a lot of people have discovered one way or another, whether it's religion or spirituality or just psychology, or just, there are different ways to get there. People have realized that it's an inside job, right? Joy and happiness is an inside job, and material things bring you pleasure. Alcohol brings you pleasure, sex and all these things, they bring you pleasure, but those pleasures quickly turn into sadness if you're not, feeling really good inside, right? This is an area that I talk about in the book called the difference between self-esteem and self-worth. Is a subject that relates to this, in my opinion. I think self-worth is really at the core of that, the numbing of alcohol and drugs and prescription drugs and distractions and television and all the things that make our brain feel pleasure, from TikTok to, those are all like addictions. Sugar, coffee, relate to somehow numbing the pain. We're just numbing the pain. This is modern society. And in my case, I want to make it clear to everyone that I was extremely grateful for all the blessings in my life. Those are not, I think you can be grateful with what you have, but not be satisfied. You want more,
Right.
you know, there's nothing wrong with that. You can be grateful and dissatisfied at the same time, right? You want more. You can be grateful. And in my case, I was not feeling good. I didn't have the tools in my toolbox. Some people have them from being raised differently or from having done the work. But in my case, at the age of 40, I didn't have those tools. I felt anxious. Um, I didn't feel good. I didn't feel really particularly well. And I think that when you're depressed inside of a party where everybody's having fun, you feel worse than if you're depressed in a place where everybody's sad.
Right.
Right? Misery likes company. So in my case, the fact that I had all these blessings and everybody that saw me said, "Oh, you're living the dream," made me feel inside like, what? I can't even express this to people because obviously you don't get much empathy when the world has really smiled in your direction. And I wasn't a victim. I was just noticing and having an epiphany that all these material things are not making me feel whole. They're just providing comfort and luxuries and freedoms and joy and pleasure. But I was seeking for more than that. And also having children at the same exact time, having babies. I think having babies, whether it's for a man or a woman, is a pivotal time in your life psychologically. In my case, it brought up a lot of the fears I had in me, fears that I had managed for myself, fears about. In my case, my biggest fear at that time was that something bad would happen to my loved ones because this was a trauma that I experienced in my youth. So when my kids were born, all of a sudden that fear just woke up. It was like a sleeping cell and it just woke up. I was so afraid that something bad would happen to them. So all these things became a part of my journey of well-being, wellness, my wellness journey. And that included physical, spiritual, psychological, and that's it.
Yeah.
That was the path. And through therapy, through many things, through meditation, through exercise, I've always had a pretty healthy diet, but it's even gotten better. Not drinking alcohol much, not smoking cigarettes, all these things. It's been a wonderful journey. And that's an opportunity that, frankly, I wouldn't have if I hadn't sold my business the way I did. Because having time and money, I don't want to be hypocritical. I mean, I can dedicate 2 hours a day to my wellness and a couple of hours a day to my kids, and then have 2 hours with my friends having lunch. That doesn't last for too long, but that's a luxury in this world. So
yeah, I think it's important because this is something I talk a lot about on the podcast. I think from somebody coming from my perspective that, for me, at least, I feel like I'm at the beginning of my career. I'm just starting my first entrepreneurial venture. I'm, very much like still a green in what I would consider any career, but health and, health in all three categories, mental, physical, spiritual, is at the forefront of everything that I do because I deeply understand that without those three things being good, I can't show up as my best self for my business. Even if I wasn't an entrepreneur, I couldn't show up and be an effective employee. And it doesn't matter whether you're at a place where you can, afford the greatest healthcare treatments and a dietitian and all this stuff. Like, obviously those things are great. And I aspire to be able to retire and to live out my wellness fantasies. But you have to find a way to incorporate those as early as possible because I feel like, you're only setting yourself up for better chances of success. Increasing your odds of luck, I feel like.
100%. And I think the world has changed. when
Mm-hmm.
I started diving into natural health, it was 1991. So back then, I was labeled a freak because I went to seek out the one obscure health food store in the town,
Mm.
right? That hippies go to. Well, 90s were no longer, the
That's
60s,
what
but
I was gonna ask if people called you hippie.
no, but I was a vegan for 10 years because I really studied nutrition on myself. And
Hmm.
I'm no longer a vegan. I don't believe in being a vegan.
Yeah.
But I was a vegan for 10 years between 1992 and 2003.
But that was also, I
So
feel like, the time when veganism was thought to be like a healthier way forward. We were told like meat causes high cholesterol and all these
yeah,
things.
we were, but I knew no one that was a vegan. I
Hmm.
was the only person in my world that was a vegan. So it was kind of premature. And then fast forward 30 years, and now natural health and whole. When I saw the first Whole Foods store open, I mean, it was like a church in I
Yeah.
was looking at the first church in my life. I was like, oh my God, there's a whole supermarket dedicated to natural foods.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it was just, I couldn't imagine that in my lifetime. So what you're describing is much more common today. We've made such huge strides, and being in the natural product category of skincare, I see the new generation really embracing environmental issues and health issues like no one in my generation, right? In my days, people were smoking cigarettes like they were, carrots. Yeah.
Was it
So
hard?
you've come a long way. The
Yeah.
young people today have come a long, long way. And I think it's cyclical
Yes.
because I also see my young kids, which are a different generation than you, completely rejecting this whole food organic.
Really?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's just my kid. Is it because we've been indoctrinating them into that world
Yeah.
and they're just rejecting it? But it seems, teenagers are known for eating junk food. Maybe they'll grow out of it. But I think wellness has made a huge leap in uh, since the millennial generation. I feel that it's
Hmm.
it's shifted in a big way, and I couldn't be happier about that. Health is
When,
wealth, my friend.
agreed. When you guys were, I think, let me back up. Anybody who is starting a company that is ahead of its time, I feel like will run into challenges like these. And I'm curious to know when you guys were, hunting for labs and, pushing them into new horizons, what were some of the challenges? How hard was it to get labs to work
They
with
were
you?
laughing at us. They were laughing at us because we
Really?
wanted to use natural ingredients. Yeah, they were laughing at us. It's like asking your MD if taking vitamins is going to cure your illness, right? They laugh at you. Um, and then some would tell us that they were going to put all these ingredients we asked them to put, and then we find out from an independent lab that they put some ingredients we didn't accept, so we had to change. And eventually, it drove us. Every problem is an opportunity in my mind.
Mm.
So it drove us to have our own laboratory. And that's what we did in 2004. And we created our own lab in our offices where my wife was making award-winning natural formulas that we then sold directly in our own stores. So it was a
Yeah.
very vertical operation.
I think that's the dream. And one part of the book, it was like a full cliffhanger for me. You started talking about ingredients, which was so exciting as somebody who's on the same, wavelength as you. I've been on a whole kick for the last couple of years to replace everything in my product circle, especially as a woman. We use so many products that's been marketed to us, which we probably don't even need. And so it's been on my radar to try to, get rid of anything that's not, all natural as possible. And so to hear that you're really doing something super unique and interesting in this
Yeah,
space, I'm so curious, like, are you guys still working on it? What's next?
we are and we're not. We're we're in a unique situation, and unfortunately, we had to kill ingredients to save ourselves.
Mm.
That's the best way I can say it, honestly, is I did not enjoy building a brand anymore. That is not what my purpose was. It's not what makes me happy. It's not what makes me fulfilled. I love the brand. I think it was a magnificent brand that really was innovative and very disruptive. But,
Yeah.
the way I describe it is like, imagine you take a basketball player in his 20s. He's a champion. He wins rings every year, right? He just kicks ass on the court. He wins championship. His team is glorious. He goes to the Hall of Fame, but take that individual in his 50s and put him back on the court.
Yeah.
What happens to him? He gets killed on the court. He can't compete. That's not where he belongs. He belongs in the owner's box. He belongs in the coaching staff. He belongs in support of the success of the team, but he doesn't belong on the court. That's how I felt. I felt too tired to be on the court, frankly. I don't have that hustle. I don't have that stamina. I don't have that energy. And I'm wasting all my expertise and experience and passion to help the next generation of entrepreneurs with trying to build another brand that I don't have the desire to do.
Yeah.
So I had to really I had to kill it to save myself, unfortunately. And that's one of the beauties of being in my situation, that I can say no to something so I can say yes to something else. I can be choosy. Even though it was a hard decision to make, I had that clarity in my life of what I really wanted to do. And fast forward 2 years later, I'm talking to you. I've written a book. I'm investing in brands. I'm working with founders every day. I'm impacting people's lives. And in the back of my head, I feel that all the brands that we're touching with our fund, strategic brand investments, are going to become little by little infused with ingredients. I see ingredients living through all the brands in our portfolio one day, because that's one of the services that we bring to these brands, is we elevate the science and clean up the formulation. So imagine, I think about us more as now a producer or director. When you take a famous producer, he may make 10 films in his career, and each film has different actors. It has different names. It has different plots and, different stories, whatever. But you see something in each of them, comes from his or her fingerprint. And that's our dream, is really to pivot, to make ingredients live through multiple brands instead of just our own. And that's our goal.
What kind of entrepreneurs do you work with?
Well, there's a few criterias. We're very people focused. We're very founder focused, because human beings can make your life a living hell or an absolute joy. So we're trying to find the latter. And in business it could shift.
Yeah, but, especially we're trying everything you went through with the M&A. I feel like after that, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, listen, we're really motivated to help. Of course, we'd love to make money. It's not a charity, but that's not our primary focus. Our primary focus is really to help tomorrow's entrepreneurs and to leave a legacy of great brands behind us. And we want to do that with people that we enjoy being around, that are really smart, that have really good characteristics of someone that can win this game. And then a product that fits into the categories that we like to play in, which is beauty, men's grooming and wellness in the luxury space, so that we can really help them the most, because that's the industry we have most influence in. So it really depends. We don't have investors. We're called what some people refer to as balance sheet investors, meaning we don't invest people's money. We invest from our own balance sheet. So we have no one to answer to. Therefore, it's a lot of gut feeling, frankly,
Hmm.
mixed with some financial crunching numbers, due diligence. But we really have to like the person and what their brand stands for, and that we can really have an impact on that. That's really the
From
key.
from what I understand, it seems like investing in general, especially in the early stages, is a lot about people, not necessarily the product. It's more like, is this somebody that you think can, like you said, win the game long term and adapt? Because, if especially if you're doing something early stages, taking money, your solution will probably evolve and grow as it should as you iterate and test and refine.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's more commonplace nowadays, where I feel like before it was like, what was the idea that you were investing in?
Yeah, there's different kind of investors. I mean, I fall into the camp that I fall into is what they call spray and pray, where you put small chips across the board
Mm.
and maybe one of them is going to blow up. But because our investments are so high risk, um, and knowing what it takes to be an entrepreneur
Yeah.
and knowing the odds that we discussed before, I realized that the type of entrepreneurs we want to work with are those that need more expertise and guidance than cash. And we provide more expertise and guidance than cash. And then with that expertise and guidance and the little bit of cash that we provide, we help them to get to a place where they become investable. And that's really the model, to get them to a place where we can introduce them to real investors. Not that we're not real, but investors that bring bigger checks to invest in their companies, which they might have not been able to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
Uh, a lot of entrepreneurs, I've seen so many entrepreneurs that are smart, hardworking. They've experienced some success with their brand or company. Um, they understand their industry, and yet you look 5 years later, they're anxious or out of business.
Mm.
So we feel that there's a missing piece in this entrepreneurial equation, which is to have seasoned operators, entrepreneurs walk along with you, take the journey with you without doing the heavy lifting. We really don't do the
Yeah.
heavy lifting, but we walk with our founders for 3 to 7 years. That's our model. And the
Mm.
way I do that is I know exactly what's going on in their business. I'm sitting on their shoulder and I help them navigate their strategy, their decision making, their opportunities and threats. And hopefully the biggest issue entrepreneurs face is the mistakes they make that cost them money, cost them time, and sometimes cost them their companies.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can help them minimize those mistakes and let them do what they do best, they will eventually find their way to the top.
Yeah, and that's priceless.
I believe so.
Now
Very
that
few people do what we do, by the way, unless they're consultants, and consultants have not been as successful as we have in most cases. So they're at a disadvantage.
is it just like a branding issue because they call themselves consultants, or is it just because they simply don't do it to the level and degree with which you guys do?
No, I don't want to knock consultants. Consultants are expert in something, and they can bring that expertise to your business. But what we do to walk with them for 3 to 7 years, invest, and become their partner is something that you don't find, because either you're real investors that have investors behind you. You have to bring them returns. Therefore, you're aligned with your investors more than your investees, and you don't have the time to dedicate the time that we dedicate to our brands. It's just not. You almost have to do it as a calling, if you will. That's how I feel. I want to help. It started from the notion of wanting to help those that are struggling entrepreneurs, that are, what do you call them? Anyways, people like me.
Yeah.
But I beat the odds. And, if I can help them, if I can help many of them, and I think I can benefit from that, from their success, I find fulfillment, I find fun, and I find financial rewards. And that's like the holy grail, in my opinion.
That's what I hope for every entrepreneur that, is out there right now. Like, that's what I hope that they achieve in the long run. Because to me, I agree completely. Like, that's the dream.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much science around the notion that helping is is the fastest way to joy and happiness.
Mm.
And I don't know how it works, but it works.
So, okay, last question. And this is a purely selfish question. I'm just very curious. What are you and Miriam's favorite like brands for beauty? What do you guys recommend that's like purely?
You're asking the wrong person. I would tell you, there's very few products out there
Yeah,
that we would buy.
that I imagine.
I mean, I would ask you to go to natural places and look for ingredients that are the mildest. Look at ingredients lists that are smaller, not longer. The longer the ingredients list, the worse it is. Sometimes
like an apothecary.
Well, it depends. Look whatever you're going to buy, whatever you're going to consume on your skin, through your nose, or in your mouth. Read the ingredients listing carefully of everything you consume, because do you know what synthetic chemicals are made from?
Petroleum.
Thank you. So most people don't realize that every synthetic ingredient is made from petroleum. And, you want to drill oil and fuel airplanes and automobiles, go ahead. But don't make me ingest it through my skin, my nose, or my mouth.
I saw something online actually that was saying that like one of the greatest scams was that, in the car parts industry early, I don't remember if it was like during the Industrial Revolution, that they were like, what if we put this, like tire lubricant in a different bottle and marketed it as skincare? Like
the story's a little different. It was in I forget the exact date, because I actually wrote a book on petroleum.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't publish it. I haven't finished it, but I wrote the whole thing. So I can tell you that the cosmetic industry was born from a man that turned crude oil into basically petroleum jelly at the time it was called, which is Vaseline. That was the first cosmetic product. And before that day, if you wanted skincare, you either bought it locally, like a bakery that made fresh goods, or you made it at home with natural ingredients, because it could not be kept for years. It could not be preserved. The petroleum jelly changed the entire face of cosmetics by allowing a product to be shelf stable for years. You could keep it in your medicine cabinet. You can ship it across the world. And then from there, it evolved to become the entire industry as we know it. And my purpose is to really encourage the world to minimize the use of petrochemicals. I'm not against petrol, but I'm against using petrol to create Lululemon clothes and soft drinks and pharmaceutical drugs and candles and cosmetic products and fake grass and fake furniture and all the things that we consume on a daily basis that are making us very sick.
Yep. Agreed. Well, we're nearing time, so I want to be respectful, but thank you so much for taking the time and sitting down with me. It's been a wonderful conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. It is one that I am incredibly proud of and absolutely honored to have been able to be a part of. I personally found this interview fascinating. I had a ton of actionable takeaways, so I hope you guys did too. Anything that we mentioned, including his book and any connection points, are all in the show notes. And if you enjoyed the episode, please hit that 5-star rating. And if you're feeling up to it, leave a kind review. You guys know the drill. If you have any questions from this episode that you want me or Eric to answer, please comment them in the reviews, and I would be happy to answer them at the end of the episodes on mine or his behalf. If you want more from me and Mimir, follow me on social media at Hi Maddie Kelly, or check out my website, mimir.ink, for contact info, partnership opportunities, of course, key takeaways on all the episodes, and I will see you guys next week.